Hello and welcome to this next part of the module on quantum mechanics. In the previous lecture, we studied properties of Schrodinger wave equation. We talked about Schrodinger wave equation, its properties. We also tried understanding Bohr's model better and the energy quantization and Bohr's explanation about that using string analogy, and where we basically explained that the particle can be thought of a moving particle or a vibrating particle, however in a confined system, in a circular confined system, and as the vibration frequency increases, the energy increases, and that can be seen as number of oscillations in a given orbit. Then we came up with the Schrodinger wave equation, and I repeatedly emphasized that Schrodinger wave equation is an hypothesis of quantum mechanics, is not an equation which was derived from first principles. It was an equation which Schrodinger just thought about. I mean, it just came to Schrodinger's mind. And then I told you about the properties of the Schrodinger wave equation. For instance, the wave equation or the psi. So what you see on the screen here is the wave equation. For this, we said that it must follow the relation which is total energy being equals to the kinetic energy plus the potential energy, and psi, which is the wave function for the particle that we are treating in this system, psi is the solution of this equation which must follow this constraint. While there are a couple of other mathematical constraints or conditions which the psi must also follow, for which the solution of this wave equation or the outcome of this wave equation in form of a wave or a wave function would be valid. So what are these conditions? Condition number one, as I said, psi x must be finite, single valued and continuous. Condition 2, as I said, was d psi by dx must also be finite, single valued and continuous. We also talked about the implications of psi or the physical meaning of psi. So psi itself doesn't say or doesn't mean anything, but then Max Born came up with this idea that psi, the mod of psi x square, is nothing but the probability density function. The probability of finding the electron, if we are treating electron, if we are talking about electron, then electron or the probability of finding the electron is defined by mod of psi x square, which is the probability density function. So if you are trying to find the probability of electron being present in a region x to x plus delta x, then the probability is going to be nothing but the integral from x to x plus delta x and psi x mod square dx. So this is the meaning of psi, but psi also tells that these the solution of wave equation in form of psi also also gives us an idea of the possible states in which an electron would be present. So you'll see later that psi may have multiple solutions, and all those solutions, let's say psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, psi 4 and so on, all these solutions would represent possible states in which electron may be present in a certain form, or as according to a certain unique probability density function. But there are other things as well that you can do with psi. For instance, with psi you can expect the momentum of the particle or the energy of the particle, that we'll see here. So often the question comes, how do you extract information out of psi? So the expected value of the position, if you want to find the mean position of an electron being present in a given state. So let's say psi has different values, being psi 1, psi 2, psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, psi 4, all the way up to psi n, and let's say each psi value represents a given state in which an electron might be present. For instance, if I give you an analogy, in case of hydrogen atom, you have these orbitals. And each orbital is nothing but a unique state or a group of states. So now if you want to find the expected position of the particle in a given state, so you have to use that particular psi. So let's say this is the psi in which you want to find the expected position of the particle in this psi. It could be psi 1, it could be psi 2, anything. Let's say this is psi n. Then the way to extract mean position or the expected value of position is, you have to apply this integral, so which is for the entire region. We are talking about x, and then you have psi n mod square dx. Now if psi is normalized, then this is good enough. If psi is not normalized, then you have to normalize this as well using this relation that I discussed earlier. Now this is for the position. What do we do with any other generic quantity? So if there is some other generic quantity, use the other relation. Let's say that generic quantity being g. In that case, you use this relation, and here you have this function gx. That's the expected value of gx in general. But we'll be often talking about position, and sometimes we'll be talking about momentum and energy. Then, so for instance, this the x here is the operation performed on psi, and this x is will give you the expected position. The operation that we perform on psi could be anything else. It could be a general function gx, where we are trying to identify the quantity g, or it could be something else. For instance, we may be willing to extract the expected momentum or expected energy. If that's the case, then you have to basically apply different operators, and the momentum and energy operators are extracted in this fashion. So for instance, if you differentiate psi with x, what do you get? We have seen this earlier. If you differentiate psi with x, you get I by h bar momentum times psi. This you can extract from the relation for the particle in free space. So the psi value that we saw for the particle in free space, if you take that, differentiate with x, what you get is I by h bar momentum times psi, which means if you rearrange this part of the equation, what you get is momentum times psi equals to h bar by I d by dx psi. So now what is the momentum operator? The momentum operator is is, if you take out psi from here, the momentum operator is this h bar by I del by del x. So this is the momentum operator. So if you have to find the momentum of a particle, this is the operation that you have to do on psi, and then you have to feed it back into this equation. Similarly, let's find what is, we can derive the operator for the energy. So you remember the energy was related to the time dependent part of the wave function. So if you differentiate psi with t, what you get is minus I by h bar times E times psi. Now if I rearrange this part, what do I get? This is what you get is E psi equals to I h bar d by dt or del by del t psi. So what is the operation here? What is the energy operation here? The energy operation is I h bar del by del t, and that's the operation that we perform again in this fashion, and we extract the expected value of energy. We'll see in the next slide, and we'll use this this expected or the expectation operation, or the momentum and the energy operation on a wave function or on a generic equation, and then we'll also try to derive a Schrodinger equation out of it. Okay, so we know the energy operator, we know the momentum operator, we also know this equation that we started in the very beginning, the total energy equals to kinetic energy plus the potential energy. We know the kinetic energy, we have seen this several times in the past. We know the kinetic energy of the particle is nothing but the momentum square divided by 2m. This you can find from this relation. Kinetic energy is 1 upon 2 mv square. This can be written as 1 upon 2m m square v square. This is 1 upon 2m. mv is p, so p square. So kinetic energy is p square by 2m. And then we have a potential function. Now if we bring in the operator that we have seen earlier, so for instance for the energy we know the operator which is I h bar del by del t, and for the momentum we know the operator which was h bar I del by del x. So we put the square here, so this becomes h bar I whole square divided by 2m times del by del x square plus the potential energy. If we rearrange all of this, what do we get? We get I h bar del by del t equals to minus h bar square by 2m times del square by del x square plus u. Keep in mind that this function is called the Hamiltonian of the system, and if you note carefully, the solution of a wave equation would be a strong function of this is Hamiltonian. And what is different in this Hamiltonian? U. So u is what is going to be a function of the system that we are dealing with. U will be strongly dependent on the system in which the particle is bounded. It could be a free space, that then the u will be 0. In free space u will be 0. It could be a particle inside a box. In that case, inside the box u will be 0, outside the box u will be infinite. It can also be a quantum well, where inside the well u would be 0 or some lower value, and outside the well u would be some higher value. It could be anything else. It could be a very complex function. You could be a very complex function, strongly dependent on the system that we are dealing with, the system in which we are trying to study the dynamics of the particle, or in this case the electron that we are dealing with. So for instance, let's say you know most of the time we will be talking about solids, we're talking about semiconductors. So in that case, can you imagine how you will be? Let's say you have a semiconductor with these atoms being present everywhere. And the potential distribution around an atom looks something like this. So if this is the point where the atom is present, the origin, the potential distribution looks something like this. So you have very high potential near the nucleus, and as you go away from the nucleus, the potential will become 0. So if I have to draw, let's say we draw the potential distribution in this direction, it will look something like this. Right? And the same in this direction. So you can imagine that it would be a very complex system. You can imagine that if you have you can also think of it in this way. If you are trying to imagine this function, imagine you have a sponge pad, and now in this sponge pad you have pressed hard at some of these points. Now what will happen at these points, at all these points, you will have a deflection. If I show you a cross section, it will look something like this, and rest everywhere it will be flat. Rest everywhere in all these regions it will be flat. And if you visualize from an angle, let's say from this point, if you try to visualize this deflection, that's exactly is the potential distribution across a crystal lattice if the atoms are distributed in the fashion as I have drawn here, right? So your Hamiltonian could be anything. I mean, the moment you change the crystal lattice, your Hamiltonian will change. The moment you change the solid type, let's say from cubic to something else, the Hamiltonian will change. The moment you change the dimension of your solid, the Hamiltonian will change. If it is a bulk solid where you have infinite boundary condition, the Hamiltonian will be something else. If you have a finite solid with finite boundaries, the Hamiltonian will look something very different. So depending on how the Hamiltonian changes, or depending on how the U changes, the solution of Schrodinger wave equation, which is psi, will vary. And if psi varies, you can imagine that the expected value of x, momentum, energy, everything will change. So the dynamics of that's the reason why the dynamics of the particle will be a strong function. The dynamic, if this is electron, dynamics of the electron will be a strong function of the solid that we are treating with, the kind of material we are treating with. Okay, so now coming back to this equation. So now coming back to this equation, if you multiply psi both sides, then what you get is Schrodinger wave equation, as you see here. Now this is a time dependent Schrodinger wave equation. And we will see later on how to derive a Schrodinger equation which is time independent. So now again, summarizing, if we saw the expected the operations. So now if you have to find the expected value of the momentum or the energy, you have to do these operations on psi. Earlier, since the momentum or the if you go back, in this case x was not making any change to psi. That's why x was kept separate, and psi star psi became psi mod square. But in principle, the equation, if you have to calculate the expected value of fx, what you have to do is you integrate from minus infinity to infinity psi star x psi dx. Now since this x is not making any change to psi or psi star, we can keep this aside, and psi star and psi became psi mod square. Now as we see here, in this case we apply this operator. The operator goes in between, and what you have is psi star operation psi dx. So if you solve this, what you get is the expected value of momentum h bar I comes out. Inside the integral you have psi star d psi by dx times dx. Similarly for the energy, you put the energy operation here between psi star and psi, and I h bar comes out. What you have is psi star d psi by dt times dx. Now keep in mind that if the wave function is not normalized, you have to normalize expected value, or divide the expected value of momentum or energy by this normalization factor, which is psi star psi dx integrated for minus infinity to infinity. Now the other aspect is time independent relation, or can we derive a time independent relation out of the time dependent relation? And most of the time we will be dealing with time independent relation when it comes to solids and many other systems. You can also so we will see that later, that the probability density function, you will find that the probability density function is independent of time, and therefore it would not harm if you use a time independent relation to basically understand the dynamics or the properties of a system that we are dealing with. Now how do we do it? So we assume that that psi is, we can start with, for instance, psi for particle in free space, and for that we had a wave equation. This is the wave equation that we dealt with earlier. If you divide this, you can rewrite this wave equation as in amplitude e to the power minus I e by h bar times t, and the other term could be e to the power minus I p, which is momentum, by h bar times x. So you have, this is one of the term, and this is the other term. Now if you say that, let's say if I write psi in form of some time dependent function and another psi which is position dependent function, so let's say psi x times some time dependent function which is let's say phi t, then I can rewrite this psi as in psi, which is function of x, times e to the power minus I e by h bar times t. Now before I move further into time independent wave function, we can see this right away here. You can try to derive the probability density function from this relation, and you will see that if we derive a probability density function, what we have to do, basically psi star psi, and psi star psi in this case will be, we have psi x e to the power minus I e by h bar times t, and times psi x star e to the power plus I e by h bar. Now if you multiply this will be cancelled out with this, and what is left out is psi x star psi x, a function which is purely time independent. So the probability density function is purely time independent, and therefore there is no harm in using a time independent function or a time independent equation or a time independent wave equation for in future dealing with the behavior of the system or the behavior of the particle inside a system. Okay, so coming back, so we basically got a relation for psi, which was psi x, which is purely an x spatial dependent function, times another term which is time dependent. If you feed it back into the Schrodinger wave equation, time dependent Schrodinger wave equation, what do we get? Which is basically here we know our time dependent wave equation, minus h bar I del psi by dt equals to minus h bar square by 2m del square by dx square psi plus u psi. Now we feed this psi value, we replace this psi by the term that we have derived here, and you apply the differential. Left hand side, the x term will be differentiated, e will come out. So what do we get? We get e a psi. This psi is the function of x, e to the power minus I e by h bar times t. On the right hand side, what do we get? We get the time function will not see any derivative with x, so this will be treated as a constant. Minus h bar square by 2m is a constant, u is a constant. The psi will be replaced by psi x in the right hand side of the equation. Now as you see that this time function is common both the side, so we cancel this out, and if we cancel it out, what is left is e psi. This is purely function of the dimension, minus h bar square by 2m times del square by dx square psi plus u psi. If we rearrange this further, what do we get? We get h bar square by 2m times del square psi by del x square plus e minus u, where this e is the energy and this u is the potential of the system, times psi. We further rearrange it, and we'll often treat the equation in this fashion, as we see here, where del square psi by dx square plus 2m by h bar square e minus u times psi equals to 0. This is the steady state equation, and this is the equation that we will be dealing with in future. Okay, so to summarize, we started with a Schrodinger wave equation which was time dependent, and from this time dependent we derived a steady state equation, and this is the equation that we will be dealing with in future, which is del square psi by dx square plus 2m by h bar square e minus u times psi equals to 0. Now as you see, this is a second order differential equation, and to solve this differential equation there there are certain prerequisites, or just quick recap of how to solve any general second order linear equation with constant coefficients. And we will see later that we will use these forms of the solution, and then we'll apply the boundary conditions that we learned in the very beginning to solve the Schrodinger wave equation. So now let's say if you have any generic second order linear equation of this form, where these constants, particularly the constant for the second derivative, is not equals to 0, then you basically get a characteristic equation. What is this characteristic equation? You have, this is of some form of AR square plus BR plus C equals to 0, and you know that how to get using the quadratic formula, and use the quadratic formula to find the roots of this polynomial. So how do we do that? We know, when for instance in this case, if b square minus 4ac greater than 0, then you have distinct real roots r1, r2, and in that case the solution of this differential equation is going to be y equals to c1 e to the power r1t plus c2 e to the power r2t. Now this r1 and r2 are nothing but some roots of this equation, this quadratic equation that we saw earlier. C1 and C2 are basically the constants, and that you derive based on the solution or based on the boundary conditions that you impose on this. Now the other possibility could be that b square minus 4ac is less than 0, and in that case you get two complex conjugate roots which are r equals to lambda plus minus mu I. In case of complex conjugate roots, your solution will be a complex function which you can also write in form of the cosine and the sine. So what you get is y equals to c1 e to the power lambda t cos mu t plus c2 e to the power lambda t sine mu t. And keep in mind that here r is a complex number which is lambda plus minus mu I. The other possibility is that the b square minus 4ac equals to 0. In that case you get one real root which is repeated, and therefore the solution will look different. The solution is of the form of c1 e to the power rt plus c2 t e to the power rt. So you have to keep this in mind, and this is these possibilities is what we are going to use in subsequent slides in terms of using the Schrodinger wave equation and solving the Schrodinger wave equation for several different scenarios. So we start with the electron in free space. What's the meaning? What's the meaning of electron in free space? So you assume situation like vacuum, situation like free space, outer space. You assume situation where there is nothing in the surrounding which may exert a force or a force of attraction or any other form of force or electrostatic potential on the electron. So there is nothing around electron anywhere in the vicinity of electron that can exert a force on the electron. Now that's a scenario which is called free space, so particle in free space. Now if that's the scenario, the potential in that system, this free space is the system here, and the particle is placed inside that space, that free space, that system. So if the system is free space, which means there is nothing in the surrounding that may exert force on the particle, the potential naturally would become 0. The question is, what will be the energy? What will be the energy of the particle? So we can start with, for instance, time dependent wave equation. We know what the equation is, and in this equation, if we feed the value u equals to 0, what we get? We get del square psi by dx square. I will not write psi as psi x again and again. We know that we are solving one dimensional equation, and in this case psi x is, or psi is psi x. So it becomes del square psi by dx square plus 2me by h bar square psi equals to 0. Now this is an equation where which would have two different roots, complex roots, and therefore the solution of this kind of differential equation will be of the form of, let's assume, let's say this is k square. So we can write this equation again as d square psi by dx square plus k square psi equals to 0. Now here k is under root 2me by h bar square and if you want you can always put plus minus. Now if this is the case, the solution of this equation psi is going to be psi equals to, you get two terms, e to the power j k x plus b to the power minus j k x. So if this is particle in free space, you can assume that the wave function solution is a traveling wave, which means that the particle is moving in free space. The particle would not be steady, the particle would be moving in free space, and so basically particle moving in free space and the wave function associated with that can be represented as a traveling wave. Now the first term in this equation, which is a related to a, is the coefficient of the wave traveling in the positive x direction. So this is traveling in the positive x direction, and the other one is just basically related to the wave which is traveling in the negative x direction. Now the value of these coefficients will be determined from the boundary condition, and you remember that the boundary condition that we have to apply on psi on this, or particularly this solution, is that the psi has to be continuous, single valued, and d psi by dx also need to be continuous, single valued. So what do we do? We can assume, for instance, let's say the particle is traveling in positive x direction. So if particle is traveling in the positive x direction, then we can assume that the other component is not present, and the only way the other component cannot be present is by making b equals to 0. So what do we get? We get psi equals to, and remember this is psi x, this is the x component of psi, the psi equals to a e to the power j k x. And you remember earlier that if we have to find the time dependent function, in this case the psi x will be multiplied by phi t, and phi t was nothing but e to the power minus j e by h bar t, or you can also write it as e to the power minus j omega t. So if I multiply this, with e to the power minus j omega t, what do I get? I get e to the power j kx minus omega t. This is psi xt. Now you see we get the same travelling wave equation from where we started in the very beginning, and we derived the Schrodinger wave equation. So if you, and in that case we assumed a wave equation for particle which was in free space, and then from this equation we derived Schrodinger wave equation. Now from Schrodinger wave equation we solved for the situation when the particle was in free space, and we extracted the psi, and the psi turns out to be the same wave equation from where we started earlier to derive Schrodinger wave equation. Now in this case there are a couple of other things that you can look into. You remember, if we go back to this term, k is nothing but 2m e divided by h bar square whole under root. Now 2m e is also p square, which is momentum square, divided by h bar square whole under root. So k is nothing but momentum by h bar, right? So we can, if we come down here, so we can write momentum equals to h bar k. Now what we can write here, we also know that lambda equals to h by p. We remember this from the de Broglie's hypothesis, and h is nothing but 2 pi h bar, or h bar is h by 2 pi. So we can write this again as 2 pi h bar by p, and therefore you can write lambda as 2 pi by k, or k equals to 2 pi by lambda. So often we'll use k, and k is nothing but the wave number, and as you can say that k is related to momentum by the constant p, by the constant h bar, which is Planck's constant divided by 2 pi. So k is a representation of momentum, but k also tells inverse of the wavelength, and we'll see later that in the reciprocal space we will often use k in place of momentum. K is a representation of momentum, but it's also inverse of wavelength, and therefore we'll use k in the reciprocal space often. And often the representation of k will be in the form of the wavelength that we associate with the particle that we are dealing with, and as I said that it will also be representation of the momentum of the particle that we are dealing with. Okay, so now this was particle in free space, and what we did was we extracted the solution of the Schrodinger wave equation, and the solution of Schrodinger wave equation resulted into a value of psi, and what we found was the psi is nothing but the traveling wave equation from where we started earlier. Now let's see more practical scenarios where we'll apply Schrodinger wave equation, and we'll see how the particle would behave. So one of the practical scenario is particle in a box or particle inside a quantum well, where the energy outside the well is infinite and the energy inside the well is zero. So the potential energy inside the well is zero, and the potential energy outside the well is infinite. What does it mean? That it's a particle which is trapped inside this well. It's a particle which is trapped inside this well, and there's no way, at least classically for the time being, that we see that the particle can come out. We'll also see that quantum mechanically in this case there's no way the particle can be outside this region, because the potential energy is zero, and practically there's no scenario where the potential energy can be zero. You can think of this as an ideal scenario where, let's say, subatomic particles are trapped inside nucleus. So you have nucleus, and inside this nucleus you have several particles which are trapped inside this nucleus. This nucleus is nothing but, you can think of the nucleus as a spherical region where the potential inside the region is very small, and potential outside the region is close to infinite. That these particles are trapped inside this region, which you can think of as a spherical region, which you can also think of as the nucleus of an atom. So you have subatomic particles which are trapped inside this nucleus, and there's no way they can come out. We'll also see scenarios when where they can come out a little later on. Okay. So we start with writing the Schrodinger wave equation. Again, so we basically have three regions. Let's say region number 1, region number 2, and region number 3. Now, if the potential is infinite in region number 1 and 3, we know that psi equals to 0. If the particle cannot go in these regions, which are region number 1 and 3, if the particle cannot go there, the probability of finding the particle will be 0, and therefore the psi will be 0, which means that psi is 0 at x equals to 0 and at x equals to L. So we have only one region which is left for which we have to calculate psi, which is region number 2, and in region number 2 psi equals to the potential equals to 0. So for potential equals to 0, we already saw an equation in the previous slide, and we also remember the solution of this equation, but this time we'll write it in form of the sinusoids, because in this case we are not assuming a particle traveling only in one direction. The particle may be somewhere here, and it may also be oscillating inside this well. It may also be oscillating left and right. So the particle can be present anywhere between 0 and L, and it may be oscillating between the boundaries of this potential well or the box. So the solution will be A times psi sine 2me by h bar, 2me is under root, b cos 2me under root by h bar x. So now what do? We have to now find the value of A and the value of B. So we already have a couple of things. We know that the value of psi at x equals to 0 is equals to 0. We know that value of psi x equals to L is equals to 0. A lot can be solved from this, and we also know that the psi star psi integral from 0 to L must be 1. So if we apply the boundary condition, as you can see, now for instance, if you feed for x equals to 0, this equation becomes 0 equals to a sine 0 plus b cos 0. Cos 0 is 1, sine 0 is 0, so it becomes 0 plus b equals to 0. So this gives us b equals to 0. Now what next? We then apply L, x equals to L. Now for x equals to L, what we find is that the equation that comes out is a sine 2me under root by h bar square L equals to 0. And for this will happen only when under root of 2me by h bar L equals to n pi. Let's clean up this region. Okay, where n equals to 1, 2, 3 and so on. So we can basically, if we rearrange this solution, what we get En, which is the energy, equals to n square by pi square by h bar square divided by 2ml square, where n is 1, 2, 3 and so on. We can further solve this, and if we basically have psi, which is a sine n pi x by L, and if we normalize this, for which, as I told you, you have to integrate from minus infinity to infinity, psi mod whole square equals to 1, that will give you a equals to under root of 2 by L. You feed it back, the psi value that you get is under root of 2 by L sine n pi x divided by L. If you look into the solution, what do we get? We get psi for, let's say psi equals to 1. When n equals to 1, what you get is this function. When n equals to 2, you get another psi. If you go back, you see the psi is a function of n, and this n can be 1, can be 2, can be 3, can be 4 and so on. This comes because of the nature of the solution that we get, and therefore you get multiple psi values, and this psi value is a function of another parameter which is n, and that's why you get multiple psi values here. And what these psi values represent? These psi values represent different states being possible. You have state number 1, where the psi value is something of this kind. What does it mean? The electron can be present somewhere in this region, where the amplitude tells the probability, and as you can see here very clearly, the amplitude is highest here. So it's obvious from this function that the expected value of x is somewhere here for psi 1. So you can call it, this is expected value of x for psi 1. Whereas for psi 2, the wave function looks very different. And what does it mean? It means the electron can be present somewhere here or somewhere here. For n equals to 3, the wave function is again very different, and it tells the electron can be present somewhere in these regions. Now the probability of finding electron is represented by the mod of psi square. So the mod of psi square is this function. This is for psi 3, and these areas, these shaded areas, represent the probability of finding electron, and so on for the other wave functions as well. Now, what is the relation of these states? The relation of these states is that they correspond to a unique energy level. So this was E1, this was E2, and this was E3, and so on. So what does it mean? It means that if the electron is in state number psi1, state number 1, it will have a different energy versus when the electron is in state number 2. And what is that energy? The energy was represented by this equation that we also derived from the solution of the Schrodinger wave equation. So as you can see that rest everything is constant for a fixed L, where energy is a square function of n. So as you go from level 1 to level 2, the energy will be increased by 4 times. So this energy, this E2 is 4 times of E1, and E3 is 9 times of E1. Now you can also extract the expected value of x, and you will find that in all the scenarios the expected value of x is going to be L by 2, and the expected value of momentum is 0. Now, why the expected value of momentum is 0? As you can see that this is particle confined inside a potential well or inside a box. So it may have certain momentum in this direction and then certain momentum in this direction because of its movement towards left and right, and therefore the expected value of momentum is going to be 0. Okay, now this was a scenario when the potential was infinite. Now, what happens if the potential is not infinite? If the potential is finite, which is kind of a more realistic scenario, the potential can never be infinite. The potential will always be finite. However, the energy or the potential level could be very high. In some cases, the potential that we had drawn earlier, in some cases, this value could be, let's say this value is U. In some cases, the U could be very high, in mega electron volts. In some cases, it could be tens of mega electron volts. In some cases, it can be, few kilo electron volts, and in some cases, it can also be in few electron volts. So it will never be infinite, of course, but it can be very high value, but it can also be a lower value. Now, if it is a finite value, then how the wave function will look like? Which means if it is a finite value, the wave function or the particle may exist outside. If this is finite value, then the solution, the psi in this region and psi in this region will never be 0, and if psi in those regions is not 0, then you get a solution there. And if you get a solution and you know that psi has to be continuous, which means that the psi will look like as it's leaking out from the potential well. It's leaking out from the potential well. It's leaking out from the potential well. This means that there's a finite probability that the particle may be seen outside. There's a finite probability that the particle may be seen outside, and this is often what happens in case of radioactive decays or decays when a nucleus decays into something else. The decay happens because some subatomic particles will decay out or will leave out the nucleus, and then the nucleus will decay into something else, and it happens because of this kind of quantum tunneling or the decay of the particle or the leaking of the particle outside the nucleus. In most practical scenarios, our potential well is going to be a finite potential well. the particle would be trapped inside a finite potential well. It can never be trapped inside an infinite potential well or potential box. But the solution inside the potential well would be of similar fashion, similar format. As you can see here, that what it shows is that still you have these different states. You have psi 1, psi 2, psi 3, and they all correspond to unique energy levels. Let's say E1, E2, E3. Yes, their relation may not be directly as E2 being 4 times of E1, that may not be valid anymore, but still there's an energy gap between E1 and E2, and there's a bigger energy gap between E2 and E3. You have similar kind of wave function being present inside the potential well. The only difference is that this wave function is leaking out of the potential well, to ensure that this finite probability of particle being present outside the potential well as well. Now this is the last example that we will, or I would say second last example that we'll look into. There is one more example which is related to particle tunneling a finite potential barrier. We'll look into this particular example in a short while. So what is this scenario now? In this case, we have a particle which is moving with a kinetic energy E, and it's basically scattering with a potential barrier. So the potential barrier having a potential of V naught, and here energy of the particle is lesser than the potential barrier. This is a typical scenario where, for instance, you have a crystal lattice and you have an electron which is moving in a certain direction, and the moment the electron sees potential field of an atom, it will be scattered. It will be scattered or it will be deflected into some other direction. That happens because of this quantum scattering or quantum deflection being present due to this potential barrier which is present there. Now this happens only when the energy is lesser than the potential barrier height. So we get two regions here. We get region number 1 and we get region number 2. So in region number 1 we should get a solution psi 1, and in region number 2 we should get a solution psi 2. Now as I said, the properties of region number 1 is u equals to 0, and the properties of region number 2 is u equals to V naught, where V naught is greater than E. So we start with our favorite Schrodinger equation, which is del square psi by del x square plus 2m by h bar square E minus u times psi equals to 0. And as you know that we have a certain E that we know, and u is different in two different regions, which means we are going to solve Schrodinger equation for these two different regions, and we will apply the boundary conditions. And one of the boundary condition that you know is psi must be continuous, which means whatever you get at psi at x equals to 0 must be same for both the functions. Upfront, psi 1, what does it mean? For this being continuous, psi 1 at 0 must be equals to psi 2 at 0. So we can write for region 1 u equals to 0. So we write the wave equation by taking out u, and we know the solution of this equation. We have done it earlier. We bring that solution again, and this solution is valid for x less than equals to 0, and we know that here this k1 is nothing but under root of 2me by h bar square, the same solution we saw in two previous scenarios. And that's why we see this this relation. Okay. Okay. Now for region number 2, we have to write the entire equation. So we have finite E and we have finite U. U is V naught and we have certain value of E. So we can rearrange it, the minus comes out, we write it as V naught minus E. What do we get? We get real roots here, and in this case K2 we get real roots which are plus minus K2, and K2 is under root of 2m V naught minus E divided by h bar square. So now we get two equations, we get psi 1 and we psi 2, and now we have to apply boundary conditions. So psi 1 is valid for x less than equals to 0 and psi 2 is valid for x greater than equals to 0. Now the first boundary condition is psi 2 must be finite. So for psi 2 to be finite, as you see, there is one diverging function. If psi 2 has to be finite, b2 has to be 0, otherwise this becomes exponentially increasing function and at some point this tends to infinity. So b2 must be 0 for psi 2 to be finite. So psi 2 becomes a2 e minus e to the power minus k2x. As I said earlier, the wave function must be continuous at x equals to 0. It must be continuous everywhere, and since at x equals to 0 we have two equations, psi 1 and psi 2, so they must be equal for the function to be continuous. If you feed in, in psi 1 if you feed 0, so it becomes a1 plus b1, and the other side is a2 that we already saw. Okay, now since the potential function is finite everywhere, this means that the psi is present everywhere. D psi by dx must also be continuous. For this again we differentiate d psi by dx, both the functions, and we basically make it continuous. We put the condition to make it continuous at x equals to 0. So this is the condition. We basically differentiate d psi 1 by dx, put the value of x equals to 0, equate this with d psi 2 by dx at x equals to 0. What do we get? We get another equation which is j k1 a1 minus j k1 b1 equals to minus k2 by a2. So we got two equations. This is 1 and this is 2. If you solve it, you get the value of b1 and you get the value of a2 in form of a1. Now the other thing that we can do is we can talk about the probability density function. So now in psi 1, what are the components? The components are a1 e to the power j k1x and plus b1 e to the power minus j k1x. So as you see, this is the traveling wave in the positive x direction, and this is the traveling wave in the, or if I draw it like this, in the negative x direction. Now we started with a system where the wave was originally traveling in the positive x direction, and the solution tells us that there is a component which also has a component which is in the negative x direction. So what does it mean? It means that this one, which is the positive wave, or going in the positive x direction, is the incident wave, and the one which is in the negative x direction is the reflected wave. But we also have a solution which is psi 2, which basically tells that it decays as a function of time, which means that the reflected wave may not be reflecting directly from this surface. It may be reflecting from somewhere inside. You can think of this as something being bouncing back by first going inside and then it's bouncing back. If I draw it again, it's a wave which is some component bounce back from the surface, some component bounce back from a bit inside, a bit more inside, and a bit more inside, and so on. And if I say that the component which bounces back from close to surface is, if this is x1, and the amplitude which bounces back from, let's say, this point, and if I call this as x2 and let's say this being xn, then the amplitude or the probability or the amplitude of the wave which reflects back would be in this fashion, that x1 being greater than x2 being greater than x3 and so on up to xn. And that's why you see that the wave which is inside the potential barrier is decaying. The probability density, the psi is decaying, the probability density function of the wave inside the barrier is decaying, which means that as it propagates, it tunnels through the barrier and then it reflects back, and the extent to which it can tunnel will also decay as it propagates inside. Of course, you can extract the probability density of the incident and the reflected wave, and if you calculate the reflection coefficient, which is nothing but the ratio of the probability density of the incident wave and the reflected wave, you can calculate what you get is 1, which means whatever was incident, everything was reflected back. It's just that some portion reflects back from the surface, and some, as an exponential decaying function, reflects back from deep inside the potential barrier, right? So this is very similar to the classical case. I mean, in classical case, what happens, you have seen that, let's say if this is a wall and you throw a ball, the ball will reflect back, the ball will bounce back. And but if you calculate quantum mechanically, you will see that the ball bounces back where there is a finite probability of ball being inside the wall, and that probability or the presence of the ball inside the wall is a function of the wave function, the wave length associated with the ball. Now the wavelength associated with the ball is so small that you cannot practically see any part of the ball being inside the wall. But at the quantum mechanical level, now you see that there's some probability of the particle being present inside the barrier, and then it reflects back. So the entire thing reflects back, but there is a finite probability that it can penetrate the barrier. So when in a case where you have, let's say, if this barrier is defined by some nucleus in a solid, and you have this electron which is moving towards the nucleus, and you know that it will scatter back, but there is a finite probability that it may get into the nucleus, and of course the entire thing will scatter back. Okay, so let me give you a glimpse of the final scenario, which is the potential barrier scenario. So earlier we had a potential barrier which was extended till infinite, and therefore the electron was bouncing back from the barrier. Whereas in this case, the potential is not extended to infinite lengths. The potential is finite. The potential barrier length is finite, and it is a length which is A here. Now in this case we get three regions: region number 1, region number 2, and region number 3. For each region we must get unique wave functions psi1, psi2, and psi3. Now again, the scenario is that we have a traveling wave with energy E, which is traveling, in this case traveling in positive x direction, and E is less than the potential barrier height. Now as you see that there's a finite barrier width, it's not infinite barrier width. You will notice that the particle will not reflect back. So you basically get these three solutions. Will not be solving this again, but I am just going to discuss this. The solution of this situation in region number 1 and region number 3 is very similar to the solution that you get in case of particle in free space, because here u equals to 0, here again u equals to 0. So these two should give you a solution which was particle in free space, and therefore that was a travelling wave. As you can see here, this is a travelling wave, and again in this case it's a travelling wave. So that solution is known to us. Now what happens inside this region? In this region, in this barrier, we have seen that you should get a function which is decaying as a function of distance. So you get something which is decaying. And now at the boundaries at x equals to a and x equals to 0, the function must be continuous, and therefore if this is a travelling wave in region number 1 and you have a travelling wave with region number 3, and the solution will tell you that the amplitude of the travelling wave in region number 1 is higher versus the amplitude of travelling wave in region number 3. Therefore, and since at the interface the function must be continuous, and inside the region, inside the barrier, the function is exponentially decaying, the solution would look something like this. If I draw it again, it will look something like this, where this is the region which is the barrier. Now what does it mean? It means that the particle which was incident on this surface and the energy of the particle, which is E, was less than the potential height, still the particle tunneled through the barrier and stayed or existed the other side of the barrier. Now this is called quantum tunneling, and quantum mechanically the solution tells you that the particle can be present the other side. That's the reason that the particle can tunnel a barrier which has a height higher than the energy of the particle, and the particle will have a finite probability of being present on the other side, and this situation is actually called quantum tunneling. So the way we calculated the reflection, in that case we basically divided the amplitude ratio of psi in region 1, the incident and the reflected component earlier. In this case we will divide psi, the probability amplitude in region number 3 and region number 1. So region number 3 is A3 star, region number 1 is A1 star. Will not get into the calculations here, but if you calculate the tunneling probability, you get some function which is written here. Now before I close this particular lecture, let's analyze this tunneling probability. What do we see here? So tunneling probability is a function of E by V naught. If E is higher, which means the particle energy is higher, the tunneling probability will be higher. If V naught is higher, the tunneling probability will be lower, right? That should be obvious. If the particle which is incident on this barrier, if this energy increases, then this gap, which is this gap, will reduce. If this gap reduces, the particle will have a higher tunneling probability. If this V naught increases, which means this gap will increase, then the probability of the particle tunneling the other side will reduce. In a sense that if V naught minus E becomes lower, the probability of tunneling will increase. If V naught minus E becomes 0, then you know that the solution in this region, in this barrier region, will also be a travelling wave solution, and the probability of tunneling will be the highest. The probability of tunneling will be 1. The other thing is that you have a parameter A. A is nothing but the width of this tunnel barrier. So if A increases, the probability of tunneling will reduce. If I increase this barrier width, if I make this barrier width large enough, then the probability of tunneling will reduce, which means the amplitude of psi 3 will lower down. If A reduces, the probability of tunneling will be high. So if A is 0, basically this probability of tunneling becomes very high and you get a tunneling wave, but A will practically not be 0. If A is 0, then we are not solving equation in this fashion, it becomes a free particle in free space. But if A tends to 0, then the probability of tunneling will increase and will approach 1. And if A is increased significantly, then the solution will be approaching to what we saw earlier, which was the case where the incident particle was incident on a barrier with very high width or infinite width. So with this, I hope you appreciate the quantum tunneling concepts based on the quantum mechanics that we learned so far, and these 4 scenarios is what we are going to experience when we study the properties of devices or device physics, various kind of devices. For instance, this kind of potential barrier you will see in gate oxides. In transistors, we use gate. The gate can be thought of as a potential barrier. And what it does is it tries to confine the electron inside the channel. But of course, since the barrier height is finite, there is a finite tunneling of electrons from the channel into the gate. That's because of the quantum tunneling. You saw the other scenario where the particle was confined inside a potential well. That's a scenario when the electron is confined inside the channel. Channel can be thought of as a potential well. Now if the electron is confined inside the potential well, and you also saw that there are different energy states in which the particle is going to be present, the definition of the channel in a transistor will be based on that kind of potential well and the energy states that are derived out of that. The scenario that we saw with the particle being incident on a potential barrier of infinite width, that's a scenario which is often experienced by an electron freely moving inside a crystal lattice, and then it experiences scattering or reflection because of a bulky atom being present there, and it will have a certain finite potential height, but a very thick barrier, and therefore the electron cannot tunnel, but electron will reflect back, or that process is called scattering. So we'll see this in all these scenarios that we studied here. We'll experience these scenarios in many cases when we get into the physics of semiconductor devices. But before that, we in the next module will also try to apply all the understanding developed so far in terms of developing a theory for solid, and that is called quantum theory of solids. With this, thank you, and I'll see you in the next class.